This is Rachel Dworkin from the Chemung County Historical Society, recording for the COVID Memory Project. Today is July 2nd, 2020, and I'm here speaking to
Ronald Shaw, Director of the Chemung County Library District.
Great, thank you. So, Ron, how has COVID affected the running of the library? Could you lay out a timeline for me?
When it started to really gather steam, say February, early March, we realized that we were limited by the governor's direction. And what was frustrating, especially for libraries, we had been originally led to believe we would be under phase 4, because that was when educational institutions would be reopening, and we're licensed by the New York State Education Department. We closed, I believe it was March 16th, to the public. Staff started working from home. I had full-time staff were able to do ordering and webinars from home. Part-time staff had to do webinars. Full-time staff worked 37.5. Part-time staff works 19 to 20, depending on their position. I found it a little bit difficult because the communication with sending stuff out to the staff, I didn't want to overload, so I kept my emails to the staff limited, and I had the supervisors contact their people, so it was just a small group. We started to hold our Zoom meetings. That was one way I could talk to the department heads. We were in contact with email, just a lot of contact with email. I had to go through the board to discuss what we were going to do. They were extremely supportive, thank God. The problem was the guidance kept changing. And that was the most frustrating thing about this entire operation. From the changes for how COVID was transmitted to what personal protective equipment was usable, lack of a better word against it, those things changed. And what started to happen was we needed to look forward to reopening. And it was very difficult because we had no timeline. So we were adjusting as we went on. And I started planning in like 2-week intervals because I thought that was the safest, smartest way to approach it. We received a couple of, I don't want to say mandate, not quite the word, but New York State made us develop a plan so that we could reopen. We did that, sent it to New York, didn't hear anything back, but again, we were determined to reopen, which we did to Curbside Delivery on the 29th of July. I reopened to staff.
No, on the 29th of June.
June, geez, I'm already in July. 29th of June, we had staff return back, 50% staff turned back on the 15th of June. That itself caused a problem because we are limited to 50% staff, which was okay while we weren't open to the public in any form. We had hoped we'd get materials in, but our vendors, for example, Ingram, did not send. We asked them to hold the shipments of materials, but then we notified them to start sending, and it took a week or so after we had staff in to get stuff. And in fact, it was a little frustrating because apparently one of my staff was talking to the Ingram rep, and he said, well, we're not going to get to you guys because you're on a small scale. We've got bigger clients we need to take care of, which I hate to say it, but I can kind of understand it in a way. It was interesting to get people to come back because you had to combat their fears. The staff was asking a lot of questions, and I basically sent out a couple of things about read this, so that it spelled out, how we were going to come back, the phases that I wanted to, stages I called it, in each phase. And I sent out our New York State plan to them so they could read what was going to happen, and if somebody tested positive, we'd contact the health department, which this became an issue, actually. What we found out when I called the health department is they get the results before anybody. They'd be calling us. So I thought that was good. And when I discussed it with them, either the employee would tell me or the health department would tell me. And then at that point in time, I agreed to then call them for follow-up advice as to what I needed to do. Again, things changed a wee bit, so I figured I'd get the latest advice from them. So I hate to say it, but the timeline's kind of a blur now. It literally, it didn't really impact me much. I was in here most days. Maybe I'd work from home maybe one day a week, I felt it was important for me to be here in case any of the staff came in looking for materials, which some did, or to get more work to do it from home. And plus I had the Makerspace crew, which they did an incredible job. They started making face shields for local hospitals, doctors' offices, dentists, etc. And that's grew to where they completed over 5,000 masks. And it's continued to this day. We're starting to sell to people. It's $2 a mask, which isn't bad at all. They're reusable. You clean them, disinfect like you're supposed to. But again, it was very successful, and I thought it was a great way to reach out to the community.
And how are you raising the funds for that?
We received donations. We set up it wasn't GoFundMe. We had it through our PayPal account, and they had to put in COVID-19 on the subject line, whatever. And we received $4,000, $5,000.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the material for the mask was expensive.
So were they using like the 3D printer to make those?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
we used the 3D printer. In fact, behind you'll see that's the mask, and the orange part, I think it is, was printed on 3D printers.
I'm going to take a picture of that before I leave.
Okay, and it turned out well, and it's simplistic, but yet it's very functional.
Now, weren't you also a distribution hub for people who were making masks at home?
Yes. That was part of our mission, which we wanted to continue to serve the public, and we wanted to make an impact in the community regarding coronavirus. So we had several organizations and staff members would be working on face masks. They'd bring them in, and they would be distributed in the boxes with the face shields. A Corning Library worked with us. Several volunteers worked with us to do these masks. Again, my Makerspace guys just did an incredible job. They were here every day doing their full shifts. And then we were able to do that because I designated them as essential workers. So, and I designated myself essential. But
Was anyone else designated essential?
not really.
So it was just you and the Makerspace. What about your facilities people or your admin?
Holly was working a lot from home, but she did come in. She did come in quite a bit. I mean, I know there's certain things she can do from home, but then, for example, payroll, she was real leery about doing from home, so she'd come in and take care of that. And she was here quite a bit. It was a little different with her because she was more relaxed about the whole thing. She didn't seem to be stressing. It really, I mean, she figured, well, this is my job, this is what I got to do, you know. So I thought that was great. I tried to have a couple people come in for meetings where we could have socially distanced ourselves, but the overwhelming response was, I don't want to come in. So we started holding Zoom meetings, which those are a pain, because you can't get the feel.
Yeah.
You know, you can't read the body language. You can't look around and see what people are, you know, doing. Forgive me, I lost my train of thought.
Zoom meetings are a pain in the butt.
Oh, yeah, they are. and what I found out was, all of a sudden, with Zoom meetings being so easy for people to do, it's like my meeting schedule tripled. And I mean, it was crazy, because we had, you know, staff meetings, you know, department head meetings. And when I say staff, I mean everybody was invited. And we once had 41 people on the Zoom meeting.
And how many people are employed by the library?
We've got 47 or 48 right now. Okay. We just lost somebody, so I don't think, she hasn't been replaced yet, but I got to look at that. And that's another thing. With the COVID virus, my concern now is am I okay just digressing? Okay. I'm now concerned because the public votes on our budget in the November election. We've been closed half March, all of April, all of May, and the vast majority of June. How does the public perceive us and keep us on the forefront? Now, we used our social media extensively. You know, we have the Facebook, we have Twitter, we have, I'm blanking now, YouTube videos. And the staff was able to upload, like, for example, Jeff Matthews in Youth Services would read the story hour, and it would be live. He'd keep it on the page for 24 hours, and then it would be deleted. But we sent out a lot of messages about our online materials, such as ebooks, the different databases we had. For example, we have learning languages. You can learn a language, obviously, just what it says. We have Kello, which was concerts, which was pretty good. We had, oh my God. Friegle, thank you. We had Friegle. We just lost that yesterday or the day before because our subscription was up. And it wasn't being used by the rest of the library system. And I mean the outside of Chemung County. So we had those things that people could access from home.
So you had talked a little bit about programming that the youth services department was doing online. What other types of online programming was the library providing?
Gosh, wide variety. Youth Services would have like I don't think it was called Teen Meetup, but basically that's pretty much what it was. They'd get together, talk about their safe zones, which is something that was instituted particularly after we got the teen room upstairs. They would they set up some times for an artist or something to be seen on Facebook doing like an art class. Again, a wide variety, and I wished I could give you more specifics, but it was just so many different things. Anything you could probably think of, we tried. So.
Okay. So normally the board meets like 3 times, or members of the board meet like 3 times a month. How did that work for the library district?
Well, it was a concern for me, and very bluntly, several of my board members are in what I consider high-risk category. And several of them did not want to come into the building because they were concerned about social distancing. We did one meeting, social distancing, here at Steele, but then the governor close down everything. So we started meeting on Zoom. Now, first Wednesday of the month, we do our buildings and grounds and our executive meetings. So that was basically, the two meetings were in one long Zoom session. Budget and finance is the second Wednesday. It's kind of funny, but that's maybe a 15-minute meeting. It's a short one. It's already.
And it actually works really well on Zoom.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of funny. But then the board meeting, I've noticed the board meetings are shorter on Zoom, and I believe it's because there's not that same give and take when you're face to face. And like when you're watching the screen with Zoom, some board members are thinking of something, maybe asking a question, but oftentimes they don't, because it's just the conversation goes quickly to another topic. And like I said, the meetings are shorter, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we seem to be a little bit more focused. There's not as much of the banter back and forth, which I think several of them miss, because there's not that back and forth that happens before the meeting or after the meeting. So that was an impact with the board, as well as me. I mean, I get to talk to them, in what I consider a relaxed setting, which is kind of nice. But the board's been meeting online. We just last night, July 1st, we had our first meeting where board members came back. We had, I believe, 4 in attendance, and we had 5 more attending by Zoom. So we're starting to maybe return a little bit to normal, but I still think it's going to be, I'll be honest with you, I still think it's going to be another month or 2 before we even start meeting exclusively in the building.
Okay. So you had talked a little bit about how you're worried about the budget in terms of what the voters will support because you haven't been open. What about other sources of funding at the state level, grants? Like, how do you think the next year is going to go financially?
It has the potential to be pretty scary. We're going, hopefully, for a reasonable % increase in our budget. If that passes, we'll still be a little bit short on certain things. It is my hope that once the board approves the budget, we will take equipment purchases out of reserve funds, which we've been very fortunate to be able to accumulate. And that helps us keep the percentage down. Hoping the voters pass the budget. If so, we'll be okay. If it goes down to the feet, then we revert to the previous year's budget, which causes me concern, very bluntly, because I may not be replacing people as people leave. And it's a concern. I mean, since I've been here, I have stated from day one, it is not my desire to lay people off. I refuse to do that. We can attrit normally through the year. As far as other funding, New York State cut library funding for construction grants. They went down from 34 million to 17 million, something like that. And that's spread out through all the libraries throughout New York State. And when you realize how many libraries there are, there's more people competing for less money. And it's the same with all the other funding sources. We get a lot of community arts grants. The staff is very good about applying. I don't know how they're going to be affected, if they're going to keep the same number of grants and the same amount of money-wise.
And I know they also get funding from the state, which has cut funding for the arts overall. So.
Yeah, it's that trickle-down, definite trickle-down. We receive money for people using the makerspace if they make something. It's a minimal cost, but it's just to help pay for the upkeep of the machines. So that's a plus, the air filters and stuff. The other money, I hate to put it this way because it's going to come back to bite me down the road, but we are very fortunate that we have a secure funding stream. And where we're very lucky is we have two foundations that support us. There's the Public Library Foundation of Chemung County, which is based out of Horseheads, and there's the Steel Memorial Library Foundation. Each of them give us, it could be $160,000 to $200,000. Steel Memorial gives us $80,000 every year. We call it Horseheads Foundation for short. They are required to give us 5% of their profit over the preceding 5 quarters, I believe it is, and that can come out, depending if it's a good year, that can be $80,000 to $120,000, $130,000.
So this year, the stock market has been up and down and up and down and up and down, and I assume that that's going to affect not only the next quarter or the next year that they give you money, but also until the 5 quarters have gone by.
Yeah.
So that means that you're going to take a hit on that.
I believe so. But what's interesting with them is they always wait to the end of the year to give us the check. Mm-hmm. So usually the market is kind of evened out, I guess, lack of a better word. This year I'm really anxious to see what happens. But again, they invest their own funds. They do a great job. They got a good rate of return. And like I said, with giving it at the end of the year, we got our money in November, December, so we weren't affected by the COVID. It's going to be the 2021 funding amount that's going to be really affected. Mm-hmm. So, and I consider us relatively well off because I have worked in, for example, when I was in Lewiston, the amount of funding was strictly determined by the town. Mm-hmm. And prior to my arrival there, they cut 30% of the funding.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, and I was very pleased because I was able to get an increase of 3% and then 5% and 5% while I was there, when other town departments were getting no more than 3%. So I was very pleased about that. But it's like a lot of small libraries or medium-sized libraries. Whatever the city council or whatever the county executive or the county legislator want to give you, that's it. You got no other recourse. So that's why I say we're better off than a lot of folks.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how the reopening has gone so far. So you reopened on June 29th. Is that when you also started accepting returns? Because I know you had closed the book returns the minute you had to close down the library.
Right.
So has accepting back old material gone, and how has the whole curbside service worked?
Okay. We reopened the book drops a week before we opened up for curbside service. We started to get a few books in, and then, and as the week went on, we got a lot more. Book drops are now open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People have been bringing the stuff back, which is good. Because the materials come back, we put it in quarantine for 3 days, and then we check it in. So it gives a good time lag between the material returning and being able to go out to the public. Now, as far as curbside delivery, it's actually gone pretty well. I mean, people can call, they can request their materials, the staff will locate them, they'll check them out to the person's account. We set up a time that the person can come to have the materials put in their car. Mm-hmm. We don't hand them to the people. We ask the people to open up their trunk, sit in their car, show us their ID so we know it's them. Then we put the stuff in the trunk and they're good to go.
Okay. So they have to call, they can't reserve through StarCat?
They can reserve, well, There was a glitch. We're trying to work it. It might be up and running by now. You can only request materials from your home library. For example, if your home library is Steele Memorial, you can only access materials from Steele. If you're West Elmira, you can only access materials from West Elmira.
So how do you designate your home library? Is it based on like your zip code, or do you call and say, this is my home library?
When you get your card, typically that's when it's designated.
So if you lived in Horseheads when you first got your card, and now you live in the city of Elmira, Horseheads is still your home library?
If you haven't changed it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, and it happens more than I like, but part of the problem is people move. And a lot of our patrons are a little bit more mobile than a lot of folks. So their addresses can change 3-4 times in a year. So that presents a problem. But when they call, we do our best to assist them. I mean, we can change the home library. You know, it's a reason. It is. It's very easy to do. But this is why we want people to keep updating their cards every year, so we know, and again, can serve them a little bit better. And it's important during this phase of what we're in. But people seem to be pretty happy. We're still getting. Let me finish that train of thought. The people are very happy. They're glad to see the staff. The staff is glad to see some of their patrons. Because, it is a good relationship with the vast majority of our patrons. Oops, sorry, was that you?
Yeah.
The other side of the coin, though, is that people want us to be reopened. And you get a lot of grief that you're not reopening. And I mean, my favorite is, well, I can go to Walmart and buy a book. How come I can't go to the library? Well, we're under, Walmart could stay open because they have food. We couldn't, And again, we had to wait till the governor, which he finally changed his mind and put us under phase 2 reopening. But people are upset, and it's just little things like that. It bothers you. But the main priority is the safety of staff first. I won't lie to you. Staff first, and then the public. I have a staff that several people are, advanced in age. They're in the high-risk category, whether due to their age or underlying health causes. So I'm trying to ensure that all our procedures are in place, that they're safe. Again, we have all the PPE, we have all the other things we need. We have sneeze guards on order, which that in itself is interesting, because some staff are saying, well, you have to have sneeze guards. No, we don't. They're not required by New York State. So, and they're on order. Hopefully they'll come in before we try to reopen. So.
And that would be at the circ desks?
All the circ desks and the reference, for example, here at Steele.
Okay.
It's additional peace of mind is how I look at it. And it cost us $3,700 to get them. But I think it's worth it because it will lessen the anxiety of staff. So,
have you had any cases on staff?
No, we've been very fortunate.
Have you had any staff members who have said they're not coming back?
Well, I've had a few staff members who have asked me, what happens if you tell me I got to come back and I don't want to? Well, you have paid time off, vacation or sick time or personal time. Some have compensatory time, so you can use that. Another question I get is, well, what happens if I got a doctor's excuse? Same thing. You got paid time off. Use it. One question, or one thing that was said to me was, what are you going to do when all the full-time staff call in sick? And unfortunately, my brain is thinking, okay, so you're trying to tell me there's going to be an organized call-in? Which I won't lie, I thought of it. I don't think it'll happen. I really doubt it'll happen. But it was just the idea of the way the conversation was going. It just kept leading up to it.
Although presumably if everyone calls in sick with COVID, you're shutting down anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, there's no way around it. And I mean, as far as I know, I'm the only one on staff who had to get tested for COVID. So I was negative. But
did you have symptoms? Is that why you got tested?
I had a fever. I had chills. You know, just overall total body aches. Unfortunately, I suffer from lupus, which when it flares up, it's a very debilitating. You know.
I understand that hydroxychloroquine is one of the treatments for lupus. Are you on that?
I've been on that for a couple of years.
Have you had difficulty obtaining that drug since the president decided it was the magic cure?
No, I've been very fortunate. And that was, to be honest with you, it was a real concern. It's like you're touting this as an effective drug, and there's no real proof. But as I kept thinking, well, will I get it because I need it, or will I not get it because it's been sold out or overprescribed? So that was interesting. That was a little bit concerning time for several weeks, you know.
But you're okay.
Yeah. You know, I'm good. I got a 90-day supply.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of how COVID has affected the library?
Like many other places, we used the opportunity while we were shut down for our maintenance person to come in and really clean.
Mm-hmm.
We were, and it's kind of funny. It's when you come in, and especially if you haven't been in here for months, you'll come in and it'll be like, oh my God, what did this guy do? Because it looks totally different. You know, I mean, he's only here. He works here like three nights a week, and he does the other branches. But it was just so noticeable, which I thought was great. He really did keep up with it, and he got to catch up on a lot of things that he had wanted to do. So that was, in a way, it was a plus for us. We've had to ensure that people are working 6 feet apart, you know, wearing their masks. We've actually stopped using the staff break room because it would need to be disinfected after somebody used it, and now it's easier to go out and sit in our lounge, and then you can just disinfect your little area. So that's something that went different.
So you had previously had policies that food was not allowed in the library proper. So have you reversed that policy so that staff can eat in the lounge? Or is that just staff only and the patron was like, why can they eat here?
Well, when we reopen to the public, the staff will probably be going back into the break room. That can't be helped because I don't want patrons being able to say exactly what you just said. Well, how come they can and I can't? But I figured while we were closed to the public, it was the proper thing to do.
So you have several restrooms in the building. All of the public restrooms are single seat. Staff restrooms are not. How are you going to be handling restrooms and cleaning of restrooms going forward, or are you just going to not let people in them?
Well, we're not letting staff use the public restrooms, and when we reopen, we're not going to open the public restrooms. We're going to be limiting people to approximately 15 minutes. So I hate to put it this way, but if you're here for 15 minutes and hopefully you've gone to the bathroom before you left your house, you won't need to use it here. Staff bathrooms are multi-stall, but what we have now is a sign on the door saying limited one person at a time. I know with the men anyway, we prop the garbage can in the doorway, and when you're in there, you close it. When you leave, you prop the garbage can in the doorway so you know it's empty. I guess we just sort of all automatically just did it without having a plan in place. So that was kind of funny. But if you use the bathroom, you're supposed to disinfect, yourself. Again, it's an individual responsibility.
You serve a fairly sizable homeless population that uses the library on a regular basis for things like warmth and shelter and access to bathrooms.
Yep.
When do you anticipate reopening? How do you think it's going to affect those patrons with the 15-minute limit and the closure of bathrooms? And when do you anticipate lifting those restrictions?
I can't give you definitives, but I can give you a projected theoretical timeline. I believe as of today, and I want to make that very clear, as of today, we may open for limited service on the 20th of July. Again, we would then allow people in. The bathrooms are closed. People will be told that when they come in. It'll probably upset people, and I know people are very upset that they weren't able to come in and use our computers.
Mm-hmm.
But again,
will people be able to come in and use computers once you've reopened for the limited use?
What we're looking at is having a couple of what we call express computers downstairs so that they can use them, 15-minute time limit. Just to, check email or, whatever.
But you would cut off things like the use of the microfilm machines and the use of the computer banks upstairs.
Yes. What we plan to do is limit people to the first floor. And what that primarily means is people would be able to browse AV, which a lot of our 30% of our circ, 33% of our circ is audiovisual.
So if they wanted adult fiction or adult nonfiction, they'd have to request that and pick it up at the counter.
Well, the staff, hopefully, the way it's going to work is they'll give their request in. We'll have a runner go upstairs, pick the materials, and bring it down.
Okay. So Teen Space will also be closed.
Yes.
You have a decent pool of volunteers who come and help with shelving and other. Will you be bringing those folks back on board?
Not really. Most of our volunteers are senior citizens, so we can't 100% guarantee their safety. I don't think anybody could 100%. So we felt it best to at least not have them come back. Maybe they'll be back by September.
Okay.
I figure the limited service will be in effect for at least 2 weeks, and part of this is the whole timeline is contingent upon what Governor Cuomo does with the percent of people who can return to work. I mean, right now we're at 50%. If we go to limited service, we can't do it with 50% and keep curbside. And we are going to keep curbside as well when we reopen. So we need the whole staff in here.
Okay. Right now, or prior to this, you would rent out the 2 public meeting rooms for meetings by and for the public.
Yeah.
Is that something that, obviously that's not happening now with the libraries closed, but is that something that you're going to continue to do, or will that likely be restricted during that same restricted
It's going to be
phase?
restricted during the whole phase. I mean, even, for example, our in-person programs, they're restricted, I figure, until at least September. And I think the meeting rooms might be the same thing because, very bluntly, it becomes an issue of if somebody uses the meeting room, are they going to disinfect it after they leave? And I don't want the staff to have to worry about cleaning the meeting rooms when they're already worried about cleaning their workspace when they start or cleaning the workspace when they leave, and then just doing the other things like wiping down door handles and doorknobs and things like that. So.
Okay. So you're thinking, hopefully, as long as we don't have a second wave or anything like that in September, that we might be able to come back to the library.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
That is my hope.
That is your hope. And we'll see if that actually happens.
Well, it's like I tell everybody, out of my hands.
Yeah.
You know, and I know, for example, during this, staff would get some staff members would get very frustrated, and it's like, look, I can only tell you what I can based on the guidance as of today.
Mm.
And it could switch tomorrow, which a couple of times it did.
So, all of the libraries are Wi-Fi hotspots.
Yes.
Have you seen an uptick in people using your Wi-Fi?
Yeah, a little bit. Not as much as I had thought. I don't have the numbers in my head right now. But we've seen a definite uptick. I mean, our services, Wi-Fi is open, I think, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And you'll see people sitting in the parking lot. I mean, I get here at like 8 o'clock some days, and there's a guy, one gentleman in particular, who's sitting there on the Wi-Fi. And when I leave at, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he's sitting there doing Wi-Fi. I don't know how his battery lasts that long.
Staff working from home, did everyone have sufficient technology to do that?
No. I was surprised to find out several staff did not have, laptops or tablets. We loaned out to staff as much as we could. There were a couple people who we weren't able to get them something. So that was, again, working from home wasn't an ideal situation, but it was ideal for the staff, so they didn't have to worry about getting paid. I thought that was the right thing to do. But most people had equipment they could use.
Okay. Is there anything that the library has done to deal with this issue that you think you would like to continue doing going forward?
We can edit this out later. I'd like to keep the bathrooms closed. All kidding aside, the bathrooms get trashed, so I'm only saying that half jokingly. I like the idea of the curbside. I mean, I don't think we can continue it indefinitely, and we certainly wouldn't want to do it in the wintertime. But it's an interesting thing, but it's just labor intensive. So that, in an ideal world, we'd have the staff and the funding to be able to continue it for a little while. It's nothing necessarily that the library could do, but I mean, I've noticed people that are being staff are being a lot more careful, whether, with their workspace, because other people will have to use it, It's just little things like that, keeping the bathrooms clean. But off the top of my head, not much.
Okay. I'd like to shift gears a little bit, talk about the Black Lives Matter movement that's been going on in this county and this country. Has the library issued a statement or otherwise been involved?
The library board issued a statement in support of the Black Lives movement, and I think it was necessary. I'm sorry, but we live in a terrible time right now. Everything is exacerbated by the COVID, by the economic downturn, and it just makes everything worse. And I'm not saying Black Lives Matter is bad only because of that. It's just something just set off this recognition. And it's great that finally we're addressing these issues. The library, our staff ourselves put stuff on our social media in support. We did a listing of materials that people could read in order to get a better understanding of the situation. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've looked at staffing. Do we have enough representation from the community? And that's something I think what I would like to do is be much more proactive in getting people of color on the staff. Because we really, Our percentage of staff, we only have two people of minority status on the staff. So, but again, the Black Lives Matter is necessary. It's overdue. I'll editorialize for a moment. I cannot believe that a police officer knelt on somebody's neck for 9 minutes. I've had civil disturbance training through the military. We were not taught to use chokeholds. We were not taught to kneel on somebody's neck. And again, I'm going back several years. But I just think, hopefully what will happen is people will start to treat each other in a much more equal way and overlook their inherent bias if they, God willing, can realize they have it.
Is bias training something that the library has provided their staff, or is that something that you're going to look towards providing the staff?
We have done it in the past.
Okay.
But I think, for example, our next training day is going to be geared, honestly, sexual harassment, workplace violence, inherent violence, dealing with inherent bias, and dealing with other populations such as homeless. And we have had these trainings in the past. In fact, during this coronavirus period, we signed up for a course for all staff that they could take, and it's on homelessness training, and it was like 10 to 12 hours to complete. And they had to do it at home, and they had to pass tests to advance to the next module. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going to really hit hard on those kind of things. I mean, typically in the past, we would have a couple of classes, then we'd do something like, we'd break it up into 3 sections. I think what I'm going to do this year is have everybody in the same session and make sure they all get the training. When we did LGBTQ training, we had staff who did not want to attend because it was against their religious beliefs. Well, I had to make them go because we are not advocating that they have to we're not going to change their personal beliefs, and that's not our intent. What I wanted was for people to understand there's other viewpoints and there's other lifestyles. And who the hell are you to say it's wrong?
Okay. So shifting gears again, let's talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted you personally. You talked a little bit about your lupus and your brief illness. Were there other impacts on you and your family in terms of activities, in terms of how you shop?
Yeah. Gosh. It affected everything. I mean, the obvious ones, like going out to a restaurant. I mean, you can only eat so many meals from home. I'm sorry. I'm not that good a cook. But it affected, being able to go out and be in the community and just be around other people. My wife had to travel down to Nashville to watch our grandkids. So we had been in isolation, though, so we weren't worried about it. My daughter's a doctor, and she had to go in to work. So my wife went down for a few weeks to help out with that. That meant I was at home alone, which was kind of depressing, to be honest with you. It was not a fun period of time. Fortunately, my youngest child lives in Horseheads, and she would do shopping for me and drop it off at the back door, which was nice. Of course, I had to give her my credit card, and she used that quite well. And it just consumes your thoughts. Because, unfortunately, I'm kind of a worst case scenario. I mean, I look at, okay, say, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I dwell on the worst because it's just my nature. And I plan for the worst, and anything not up to that is a great thing, you know. But again, it was a very depressing period of time. You couldn't socialize. We had to do Rotary meetings online, school board meetings online. And again, you know, that's my personal life stuff. It was just frustrating because I found myself losing the desire to do a lot. You know, I was fortunate because I could come into work, you know, but I shudder to think what somebody who didn't have work to go to, what they were was going to happen to them. I mean, coming to work kept me reasonably sane. So, yeah, and we couldn't visit family. I didn't see my newest granddaughter. We saw her in November when she was born. And we finally got to see her 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And we had to sit 6 feet apart. You can't hold your grandchild, you know, and it's like, geez. So, and then you're worried about them traveling and going to other people's houses, you know, like their other grandma and, you know, the aunts and the uncles and stuff. It impacted family events, like, for example, my niece and nephew both were getting married this year, not to each other. But their weddings have been postponed. My niece is going to have a small ceremony with social distancing at church, and there's going to be a minor, we think they're trying to do a little bit of a party, but again, social limits or limits on the amount of people who can be in an area together. My nephew, his fiance's father is like 80 years old, so she was very concerned about him, so they totally postponed everything until next year.
Mm.
So, I just, gosh, funerals. You know, I read about people who they didn't get to see their parents or their loved one before they died because of this. Now I have my mother-in-law is over 80, and obviously you start thinking about that because, geez, what happens if she passes away? You know, and having been gone for the Army when both of my parents passed, I know how it feels. So I would feel very bad for my wife because I don't know how she'd be able to take it.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add about that?
No, I think we did a good job reaching out to the community while we were closed. Again, we had the masks, we had the online stuff. I think at least for our users, they understood that we were there for them and doing the best we could under the circumstances. And I'm very appreciative of some of the comments I've seen. Again, there's been a couple negative comments, but it's like anything else. You can't please everybody all the time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for doing this interview.
Okay.